please welcome to the stage Axios Editor-in-Chief, Sarah Kehaulani-Booth. Please stay seated for a message from our sponsor, Unidos US. Please stay seated for a message from our sponsor, Unidos US. Visionarios is about to begin. Por favor, tomen sus asientos. Visionarios ya va a comenzar. Please take your seats. Visionarios is about to begin. Por favor, tomen sus asientos. Visionarios ya va a comenzar. Please take your seats. Visionarios is about to begin. Por favor, tomen sus asientos. Visionarios ya va a comenzar. Please welcome to the stage Axios Editor-in-Chief, Sarah Kehalani-Gu.
Welcome. Good evening, bienvenidos. I'm so thrilled. My name is Sarah Kehalani-Gu. I'm the Editor-in-Chief of Axios. Thank you so much for being here. We're so excited about what we have in store for you tonight. Before we get started, I just want to thank those who are in the room, and also we have a good crowd who are watching online. So if you are watching tonight, please use the hashtag Visionarios 2022. We'd love to have you as part of the conversation tonight. We also have our Axios Instagram in the house, so I'm sure you'll see folks taking photos throughout the evening. Before we start, I just want to acknowledge the story that we've been covering all week that is really important in Florida. Many of us have reporters there. We have friends and family in Florida. We just want to send our thoughts and prayers for those who are affected, and we really hope everybody remains safe. I'm sure you all saw the news just before this evening got started that Ian turned into a hurricane again. So this story is far from over. Now, Back to the evening, you know it is Hispanic Heritage Month. And here tonight, we are celebrating the leaders, the icons, the visionarios in the US Latino community. We want to celebrate those in the business leaders, those in government, those running nonprofits. And the reason why this matters, as we say at Axios, is because a lot of attention is being paid to US Latinos, especially ahead of the US midterms. That is an important conversation here in Washington. Here at Axios, I hope you know, we also cover the Latino community of what's important on both sides of the border. We have a special partnership with Noticias Telemundo, with our Axios Latino newsletter. I hope many of you are familiar with that. And tonight is really special because when we started the newsletter, we thought that this evening, we always thought we could do an event like this to connect with our readers and really bring all that is embodied in the newsletter to life. So this event tonight is really like a year in the making, and so it's exciting to finally be at this point. So with that said, I want to thank a few people who made this happen before we get started. First of all, our friends from Noticias Telemundo. I want to thank who are here tonight, Kevin Gray, Lori Montenegro, who you'll see later tonight, and one of our Axios co-authors, Axios Latino co-authors, Marina Franco, is here tonight as well, all the way from Mexico City. So we're thrilled to have her here. And then I want to thank La Cosecha. This is an awesome venue. I hope you have had time to enjoy the wonderful food and the drinks. It's all been delicious, and there's such a wide variety of food celebrating and from the Latino community. So I hope you enjoy that all through the evening. And then finally, with our Latino, US Axios Latino team is here tonight, and you'll hear from them and see them on the stage tonight. Russ Contreras, Astrid Galvan, wonderful reporters who bring so much to Axios and hopefully to you. You see the value of what they bring. And then, of course, our amazing Axios events team. I really think they are the best in the business. Like I said, they've been planning this for a year. They envisioned this awesome stage. And then if you look behind you, just for a minute on the wall, I just want to point out we have this amazing mural. We partnered with a wonderful Argentinian American artist named Cecilia Luesa to produce this beautiful mural here as a donation along with Noticias Telemundo. So this will be a nice tribute for this space for time to come. So without further ado, let's get on with the show.
A Axios race and justice reporter, Russell Contreras.
Thank you for coming tonight, and we appreciate it for our first ever Axios Latino Visionarios event. We really appreciate you coming, and thank you all who are viewing at home. We have a wonderful first guest today. We're going to kick things off with someone who came all the way from Austin, Texas. He is the leader of one of the fastest growing Mexican-American food brands in the country. And you're likely to see their colorful packaging in food places around the nation. It's very healthy food, but we're going to get into that in a minute. So please, damas y caballeros, give a warm round of applause for Siete Family Foods CEO, Miguel Garza. Please, make yourself at home. So, before we get in talking about food, which everybody here loves, let's talk about your grandfather, Tony Campos. And he was a civil rights leader, someone formidable in education. But before we do that, I got a little surprise for you. There he is, Tony Campos. And next to him is my uncle, Ernest Eguia, two civil rights leaders in 1957. This is a photo from LULAC. 1957 catalog. They were instrumental in creating what we now call Head Start. These are men who faced enormous discrimination and enormous barriers, but yet your grandfather is responsible for you being here today. How influential was he?
Well, first, I want to thank everybody for being here. And then thank you for that, because my mom's watching and she's probably crying now because that's her dad. And yeah, it's interesting. My grandfather, actually just my grandparents generally, but when I think specifically about my grandfather, I think of a quote from Sir Isaac Newton, and I'm going to paraphrase it because I didn't memorize it. But we've seen as far as we can see because we've stood on the shoulders of giants. And what that means to me, and the influence that it's had on me and my family, is that he overcame, and that entire generation overcame, significant hurdles that have now allowed me and my family to get an education, that have allowed us to start a business, and that have allowed us to be successful in that business. So when I think about the influence, I'm often thinking that he fought really hard. He's a World War II veteran. He's a paratrooper.
And he's still alive today, 99 years old.
Yeah, he's still alive, and he did, I think he told maybe my uncle that he was going for 100 because he might as well at 99. And yeah, he's just been this figure in my life. And I'd actually love to share a very brief story.
Please.
So my sister was doing this interview, and it was for University of Texas project, and she interviewed my grandfather, and he started describing something that he had never really shared before. And he describes being deployed, and then describes being dropped behind enemy lines 5 times, and then he tells this one story. And the story that he told was that he was dropped behind enemy lines, that half of his battalion died, and it was the coldest he had ever been, which I don't know how much that's saying because he is from Texas. It doesn't get that cold, but it was the coldest he had ever been, and one of his duties was to pick up the dead soldiers, line them up against the fence so that they could be identified before the snowplow came through. And he actually started crying as he said this, and he started crying because he started to describe the surnames of all of the individuals that he was lining up against the fence. And it was Hernandez, and it was Garza, and it was Herrera, and it was just a lot of Latino surnames. And I think the reason he got emotional in that moment is because when you fast forward to him getting back to the States, thankfully, and then him going to Baylor University, one of 6 Hispanics, and then him fighting for Latinos by creating something alongside other LULAC members called the Little School of 400. And then he took a case to the Supreme Court for voting rights. And so I think when he thought about that moment, and then he thought about all of the hurdles he had to face when he got back, it was like this moment of sadness, but also this moment of triumph. And so when I think about me and my family and our business, I'm thankful that we had such brave grandparents and great-grandparents who came here and laid a foundation for us to now have the opportunity to start a business and be successful with it.
It's amazing that not only did he come back, but he gave you the opportunity to go to school, get an education, start a business. But you started to look at it into food. Food is very personal. And I know a lot of people think of Mexican food as unhealthy. You had a different take on that. Why is that?
Yeah, so I don't necessarily know if that's my take per se. We are creating, or what we've created is a better for you Mexican-American food brand. And a little bit of a background, if you don't mind me sharing on that, is my sister in 1999 was diagnosed with an autoimmune condition. Then in 2004, she was diagnosed with another one called lupus. And in 2009, my brother recommended that she go on a grain-free diet. And we're from Laredo, Texas. And so going on a grain-free diet meant we weren't going to eat tortillas. So there goes your tacos. We weren't going to eat tortilla chips. So what are you going to, dip in the salsa? We gave up rice. And we even gave up, just as a part of like this elimination diet, we gave up beans. And I think what we didn't realize, like we actually all felt better, but it was pretty empty. And the reason that it was empty was because food is culture. Like food is so much a part of culture. And I see a lot of heads nodding, and I imagine like you're thinking about the dinner table, and you're thinking about the carne asada, and you're thinking about your family. Like so much of who we are is wrapped in food. And so my sister wasn't going to have that, and we had given up grains, but she said, I'm going to go make a tortilla out of almonds. And at the time, like almond flour really wasn't a thing, and so she gave us this almond flour tortilla at dinner, and it was pretty delicious. And we had a relatively high bar because probably like a lot of people in here, you have an abuela or an abuelo or grandma that makes delicious flour tortillas. And what was so fascinating about it is that we gave the tortilla to my grandmother. And
Did she throw it back at you?
No, she ate it, and she told my sister, this might be better than what I ever made, which was this like abuela approved stamp of approval that really made my sister feel like, yeah, I made this, and I can share it with more people, which we've been able to do.
When you start talking about a different take on Mexican food, the initial reaction is like, well, this isn't authentic. This isn't like what I'm used to. But you have argued, no, we're actually going back to the roots. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, so I think generally I have, so the word authenticity, I like to like define things. And so to me, authenticity means a true expression of oneself. I don't know if Google would say that, but that's what it means to me. And I think when people are saying authenticity, I think they actually mean traditional. And so when we set out to build our business, we knew it wasn't traditional. Because you don't make tortillas out of almonds. And you really don't make tortilla chips out of cassava or yuca, really, here in the States. And so what we were doing was a little bit different, but for us, it was our authentic expression of who we were, third generation Mexican Americans, and the foods that we grew up eating, and being able to provide that same experience for people that either could no longer eat a certain way or who wanted a different maybe take on a tortilla. So I don't think that we're not trying to redefine anything, and we're not trying to put a stamp of health on anything. All we're trying to do is, with our ability to utilize the global supply chain, we want to honor our heritage, celebrate our culture, and create food that tastes good.
Starting a business in the United States, if you're Latino, can be a challenge. We know that Latinos, if there were a separate country, would be the fifth largest, according to the GDP, bigger than France, bigger than the UK. But starting a business is a challenge because we're not getting the VC capital. What did you see when you started a business?
Yeah, so when we started, my sister distinctly remembers we entered this accelerator, and there were 0 Latino mentors. And so we're like, oh crap, they're not going to really understand why we're like wanting to build this better for you Mexican American thing. And so one thing my sister said was, okay, well, we have to go be mentors into the future. And so when I think about that, I think it's less than 2% of VC funding goes to Latino founders. And if you're a Latina, the percentage is probably even lower than that, because we all know that women-founded companies get even less funding. Yet, from '07 to 2017, Latinos started, I think, over half of the businesses, so 50%. And so we were blessed enough that we were able to raise a significant amount of capital from a group out of New York. And what I've been excited about is that it's exciting. You're a little nervous because it's a responsibility now that as we've been successful in the marketplace, we've actually seen within our natural food space, that's kind of the industry that we operate in, more Latino specifically, but then also minority founded businesses start to get some funding. So I think that there's at least an awareness, but when you look at maybe your favorite Mexican restaurant, or when you look at a taco truck that might be around the corner, often the food is really good. Like, often they should have the ability to scale the operation. But sometimes there's just not an awareness. And I think for the venture capital world, there's actually a hindrance in that they operate from a place of pattern recognition. And if you've never seen a Latino business scale like that, then you're probably less likely to invest in one. So I'm very much, and as a family, we're very much interested in taking that 2% number to 5%, 10% into the future.
You also wrote a book.
Not me personally, but yes, a part of the company that wrote a book.
Part of the company.
Yeah.
What does the book say? Yellow cheese is okay? Because it's.
Yeah, so I got to make sure to go on the record because my family wrote a cookbook, but I was more of a recipe taste tester than a recipe creator. I don't think I could go home if I pretended I wrote the cookbook.
Okay.
But what we tried to do with our cookbook, it's called The Seat at the Table. Our PR person is here, would be mad if I didn't say you can pre-order it on any of your favorite platforms. But what we did was, we grew up in Laredo. Growing up in Laredo, we ate what we've coined as like Laredo sushi. And Laredo sushi may not be a thing, but if you're from Laredo, I kind of see an eye here, like, I don't know where Laredo sushi is, but
There's no water in Laredo.
You could get sushi, and it was rolled in like flaming hot Cheeto dust. It's really delicious. And you could get just a different take on this food. So what we wanted to do with this cookbook was we wanted to share recipes from our upbringing. We also wanted to share recipes that have been created as our business has continued to grow. And we actually wanted to just create a space of inclusivity. So a lot of the recipes are like gluten-free, and some are grain-free, and some have vegan options, and some are meat options. But we wanted people to be able to experience the flavors of our upbringing, living on the border, in a way that was approachable to them. So,
in our final 30 seconds, I'm going to ask you something that has divided communities more than Republican, Democrat, liberal, conservative, Catholicism, Protestantism. Flour or corn?
Oh, man. So
you have 10 seconds.
Yeah, no, there's an easy answer. So I only would, I got to say almond flour because that's what we make, but I only would eat corn now because I can't really eat gluten. But when my grandma was living, she made the best flour tortillas that I ever had, and I think that wasn't an answer, so I like them all.
Miguel, got to say, everybody, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good job.
Due to circumstances beyond our control, Congresswoman Salazar's segment is now virtual. Please stay seated and enjoy the show.
Buenas noches. Good evening. I'm Lori Montenegro. I am the bureau chief for Noticias Telemundo here in Washington, D.C. Our next guest is not only a Republican congresswoman, she is a former television correspondent and also anchor, now a Republican member of Congress. Please help me to welcome from the great state of Florida, Congresswoman Maria Elvira Salazar.
Thank you. Wonderful to be with you. We worked together. So
yes, we did.
My
Full
pleasure.
transparency. We did work together for many, many years, and I wanted to start there. So how has your experience as a journalist have any kind of impact on being a congresswoman? Has it helped you? Has it hurt you? Give us a little bit of insight into that.
it has helped me tremendously because, you know, we're used to finding truth. We're used to asking tough questions. So that training that I obtained by being on Telemundo or Univision, now I use it by being on the House Foreign Affairs Committee and asking Secretary of State Blinken, what is he going to do with Latin America? Or going to the Small Business Committee, where I'm also part of, and asking the head of the SBA, what are they going to do for small business? So it's a great training. It's a great training because you're not afraid to ask questions and find information. And that's what you need to do as a legislator. You find info and then you vote according to what's good for your district or not.
So Maria Elvira, I want to also congratulate you on that wedding. Wishing you much, much happiness. I want to also let our audience members know that the reason we would have loved to have you here in person, but you stayed back in your district because of Hurricane Ian. And we just hope that our thoughts and prayers are with everyone in the state of Florida, and hope that in your district, we know that you got a lot of rain and wind, that everyone is okay.
Yes, thank you, Lori. Yes, basically the major destruction was a little bit further north from Miami. I represent District 27, which covers Miami, Miami Beach, some of Coral Gables, more towards the south, Cutler Ridge, Cutler Bay, Palmetto Bay. Those areas were spared. It's Fort Myers, Tampa, now it's going to Orlando. But, you know, I always believe that we are in the United States and that everything is possible. So this natural disaster went over us and we're going to recoup.
Very well. So Maria Elvira, I wanted to get straight into it, Congresswoman. How would you characterize right now the Republican Party? Is this a party where different views are accepted, or those that don't think the same are people who don't have any kind of space in the party?
Oh, no. We are pretty democratic, although we are not the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party has been infiltrated by the Marxists, and the Marxists, unfortunately, the neo-Marxists. They are controlling the agenda for Nancy Pelosi. When it comes to the GOP, we have different voices, and I am the perfect example. I am a Latina girl from the hood who just arrived in the GOP, and they have welcomed me. Even though some of my colleagues do not have the same ideas about immigration specifically, but I'm welcomed, and I have been able to vote according to my conscience and according to my district, and nothing happens. We're respected, we're welcomed, and there's always a discussion going on. So I assure you that in these 2 years that I've been on the floor, we are pretty democratic. Is the other party, the Democratic Party, that has lost that touch.
But Maria, Congresswoman, some people would point to what happened with Liz Cheney and others as a party that doesn't seem to be open to someone who has a different opinion.
Well, the thing is that Liz Cheney, who, by the way, I respected her and I had very good conversations with her on the floor. My opinion is that she left the party. It's not that the party left her. She made a decision to be siding and to be having the same ideas and positions as the Democrats, which I think are wrong. What happened in January 6th was despicable. We should know who was responsible for whom, from President Trump to Nancy Pelosi. But at the same time, we really needed to know what Nancy knew about. And I was one of those who voted for the first committee, 5 Dems and 5 Republicans, 5 Dems, 5 Republicans. So we could really get down to the nitty-gritty. Unfortunately, the committee that was formed was 9 Dems to 2 Republicans. There was no balance. Many questions have been left without an answer. What happened with the extra security forces that were promised or that were offered hours before January 6th? So we will never know what the Speaker of the House knew at the time. And that is not a fair game. Fair is 5 Republicans, 5 Democrats, go deep and find out.
Let's move on to Governor DeSantis and former President Trump. Number one, are you looking for an endorsement again from former President Trump for your reelection to the House?
Sure. I had it in 2020. If he wants to offer it to me, of course. I mean, every GOP member that wants to endorse me, more than welcome.
If Governor DeSantis decides to run for president in 2024, and so does former President Trump, which candidate would you support, or what would be the determining factor to get your support?
I think that's a very good question. But I am sure that the next president of the United States in 2024 is going to come from Florida. And wow. I'm going to wait Hampshire, Iowa, South Carolina. I'm going to let the voters, American voters in those states, to determine who is going to be winning the primary. It's not our business to be saying is this or that. That's why we have such a great American electoral system that we in our countries would love to have. Transparent, open, you vote whatever you want to, and at the end, the winner, the one who has more votes, is the one who wins. So let's just wait for that, because everyone is saying, well, is it going to run? It doesn't matter. What matters is Iowa, New Hampshire, South Carolina, and then Super Tuesday, right? And then from there, we'll see. So, and then if it's DeSantis, hey, wonderful. If it's Trump, wonderful. Those are the Republican base deciding that, not us.
Currently, you represent a district where 70% of the population, there is Latino, they're Cubans, they're Nicaraguans, and they're also Venezuelans. And many are very upset by the action taken by Governor DeSantis to send some of those Venezuelan migrants to Martha's Vineyard. Was he wrong when he did that?
Well, let me just tell you, I have some statistics here, Lori, that said that 70% of the Hispanic population, the largest minority in the country, disapproves President Biden's laws or handling of the border. 70% of the...
But was DeSantis wrong when he did that? Remember, these are political prisoners, political refugees, and you yourself have defended them, saying that their human rights should be respected at all times because they are fleeing from dictatorships that you through a lifetime have condemned. So should they be used as political pawns?
Well, I think that we should start with Biden, Lori, and DeSantis and the rest of the other governors and the rest of the other mayors of different cities, including Democrats and Republicans, are desperate because it's been highly irresponsible for the last 18 months for the Biden administration, who is the one responsible for the immigration policies in the country, to have allowed 2.5 million people. Fentanyl, child sex traffickers, coyotes. So we should go to the root of the problem, which is that the Biden administration is not doing its job. We're in an area where they can control. Why did they send 87,000 new IRS agents to go and pick on your pocket and mine and not to the border? Because Hispanics do not want open border. Hispanics wants to come in legally, and once they're here, get dignity. Which I wrote to the only immigration reform law
which was leading me to that next question. You did introduce the Dignity Act, trying to get to the root of the cause of the migration situation. Are you disappointed that more Republicans did not join you in that effort?
Well, the thing is that I have been working with my colleagues, and now, hopefully, if the voters decide that they're going to put us in the majority, then that is when dignity is going to gain traction. Because dignity was written by a Republican. 50% of the Hispanics in this country now are saying that they may consider the possibility of voting GOP. Now is the time for us as the Republican Party to give dignity to my people. And I will be the first one leading that charge and saying to my party, but then where are the Democrats? I need Nancy Pelosi, and I need the rest of those who are supposedly within the Democratic Party so concerned about the DACA and the DAP and the TPS and those people who are illegal, time to give them dignity. And I'm putting in a silver platter for the Dems and for the Republicans. And you know it because I shared that with you right when it was written in February of this year.
And also you included in the Dignity Act the issue with DACA, and they're facing a very tough timeline right now with a appeals court, which is looking like will rule against them. Will you take the lead to try to get something done for them before the year ends?
Well, the thing is that we are at the end of this session. In the next few days, session is going to end and October is going to come and Congress is not in session. But goes to show you, and this is very important, this is, I think, the lead of the story, that the Democratic Party and Biden promised that within his first 100 days of his presidency, same thing that Obama did, I promise you that within the first 100 days of my presidency, we're going to have an immigration reform law. Well, you know, Lori, very well, that they never brought an immigration bill to the floor. And they brought everything else, climate change, gas prices, BBB, infrastructure. Where is immigration? That goes to show you that the Dems are playing political football with us, the Hispanics. So now it's time for the GOP
I believe
to
the House did approve something that would have helped the Dreamers this time around. So my question to you again is, if there is an opportunity, and if there is an opportunity, Congresswoman, would you lead the charge to get something done for Dreamers as soon as possible?
I love Dreamers, but I don't want to concentrate only on the Dreamers, because the Dreamers have parents. And that is, I think it's despicable that you as a parent, you would have to abandon your child in order to save him. Is the Dreamers, is DACA, is TPS, is everyone. There are millions of people that don't fall into any of those categories that have been in the country, no criminal record, contributing to the economy, and they don't have anything to stand on. I think that's despicable. And that's why I'm defending all of them, as long as there's no criminal record and they're here in the promised land, working and helping us prosper the economy. Of course.
Congresswoman, as you well know how this works, we are running out of time, but I need to end on the following. Only 15 Latinas in Congress, yet Latinas make up 16% of the female labor force in this country. And in 2019, they were 18% of the population. This, regardless of party affiliation, how do we get more Latinas elected into Congress?
We have to go recruit them. I am a good example, Mayra Flores. That is the race to watch. Mayra, for the first time in the history of this country, she is going to win Texas 34. First time in history. Why? Because she is Mexican born, a very good friend of mine. We talk on the floor all the time.
How do we get,
she is horrible.
How do we get them back? How do we get them into Congress?
We have to go recruit them. And if I can, if I get reelected, I will be part of that group trying to find good Latina women in both parties that should be joining us in Congress, because we are the largest minority in the country. It's time for us to be represented in both parties and get what we need. And one of the things we need is obviously have a great economy, have good safety, no inflation, low gas prices, but immigration, so we can feel that we have dignity, even if we don't have citizenship to work in this country.
Maria Elvira, Congresswoman Maria Elvira Salazar, we are out of time. Thank you so much for joining us.
Always my love to you, and you're doing such a great job as always. You know, I miss it. I miss to be in front of the camera.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, you're in front of the camera with us. Thank you so much. Thank you for joining all of those who are watching us. Thank you all for watching, and stay tuned for more great content.
And now a short message from one of our sponsors, Bank of America.
We help build a better future when we harness the power to develop new ideas. The power to demonstrate what we're made of. To be the role model our community needs. To be recognized for who we are and what we do. The power to have the same opportunities as everyone else. To break ceilings. Or to build bridges. To make things happen. To start something new. ¿Y tú? ¿Qué quieres lograr? What would you like the power to do?
Please welcome back to the stage Axios Race and Justice reporter Russell Contreras.
Thank you. We're about to get another spirited discussion here. So I'm happy to welcome my next guest. He has several titles, including Marine Combat Veteran, author, Democratic Congressman, and also leads a group called BOLPAC, which is the political arm of the Congressional Hispanic Caucus. Please welcome to the stage from the great state of Arizona, Congressman Ruben Gallego.
That's a lot of water.
Yeah, please sit down. So we were sitting backstage, and you told me we're much more mild.
Yeah, some would describe me as that, yeah?
Yeah, and you said you were a straight shooter, right?
Depends on what I've been shooting that day, but yeah.
Joe. So are you running for Senate?
What year is it today?
2022.
Ask me in 2023.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is it a possibility? Have you thought about it?
Absolutely. I mean, without a doubt, I've definitely been thinking about it. Arizona's a changing state. The senator right now is failing Arizonans. I'm talking, obviously, Senator Sinema. Senator Kelly's doing a great job. I've been very open about this, and we're going to consider that in 2023. 2022, I'm worrying about taking care of Democrats, make sure they get reelected up and down the ticket, Congress and Senate. And as I said to her just recently, I wish she would also care about them too.
We were watching backstage, and the subject of migration, I saw that it was boiling at you here.
Yeah.
Some of your colleagues in Congress are descendants of people who had a different immigration policy for them.
Sure.
I'm thinking of Pedro Pan. They had federal government help. Those members of Congress are descendants of those programs where they got assistance, now are against people like Venezuela.
Like
what is your reaction to that?
Well, Maria Evita Salazar, for example, is being a hypocrite. I mean, she definitely was very much a recipient of a very good and progressive program of dealing with political refugees out of Cuba. And now when it is convenient to her, she rejects that and is basically allowing, by the way, you notice she didn't answer the question about whether it was wrong for deciding to use Venezuelans as a political prop. Well, she can't because she has a master there, and that's DeSantis or Trump. But either way, the fact is, if we had allowed the Venezuelans to have the same policy as Cubans, they would not be treated the way that they're being treated now. So she's being a hypocrite about it. She's talking about, I believe, the candidate Maria Gonzalez, who's running in Texas 34. She actually...
Maida.
What's that?
Maida.
So Maida actually got in also under the amnesty program under Ronald Reagan, right? And now she's talking about being anti-amnesty. So it's, they're Latinos, pero cuando le convienen, right? They're immigrant, pero nada más cuando le convienen, right? Especially when they're out there getting their money from their big Republican buddies and stuff like that, they love talking about being how immigrant they are, how Latina they are, but they don't end up backing up the people that actually were there for them in the first place.
At the same time, there are some Latinos that were still mad at President Obama because of the deportations and
they should be.
And disagreed with Biden the way he's handling it. What's your reaction to that?
Well, look, I think it's legitimate to be mad at all of these candidates, but let's also be clear. What did we do this year? As soon as we got in, we passed a couple of actual immigration reform bills. What happened? They got stopped at the Senate. Why? Because we have a filibuster. It's not because of Democrats, it's because of Republicans. Everyone talks about Obama being mad. I agree. I think his deportation policies were overtly targeted, most importantly, in trying to convince Republicans to vote for immigration reform by being hard on immigration. But let's be clear, we also did try to pass immigration reform and the DREAM Act, and again, was filibustered by Republicans. So Republicans want to keep pointing and saying, like, this is the problem, Democrats haven't done anything, when they're literally the people that are actually stopping it, right? So they get to live in both worlds. They get to both go to their really racist base saying, we're stopping immigration reform, and then at the same time, they get to go to moderate Latinos who want immigration reform saying, hey, the Democrats aren't doing shit, right? So it's a great con they're doing. It's actually been working out quite well for the last 10 years.
You are dedicated right now to getting more Latinos in Congress, specifically the House. At the same time, you have been very vocal that some of the white Democrats have been barriers to getting more Latinos elected.
Yes.
We're thinking of Oregon, where the House Majority PAC supported a crypto bro, as you call them,
Yeah.
instead of a Latino who won, was outspent 12-1. What is your response to some of those power brokers? They have no problem when Latinos run in majority districts,
Yeah.
but when they're not the majority, they
Exactly.
pull back. What is your reaction?
Yeah, look, I call out the Republicans on their hypocrisy, but I also call out the base of the Democratic Party. Not even the base, I would say some of the more liberal donors of the Democratic Party, some of the, well, I would say people that think they're very pro-Latino, except when somehow we run into one of their issues or we're running against one of their candidates. The way I tell them is like, you need to have us whole or you don't have us. Either you're gonna have us in the 70% Latino districts or you're gonna have our candidates in the 10% Latino districts, or you're not gonna have us as a base. So when Andres Salinas ran against the crypto bro and then got endorsed by the what's called the House Majority PAC, which is the organization that helps ostensibly Democrats get elected, they dropped $1 million in there. She ran against a total of $14 million of white crypto bro money. And so as the head of Bold PAC, it's an organization that is designed to help Latinos get elected. It is designed to actually overcome these types of barriers because a lot of our people, when they run for office, don't come from institutional wealth. They don't come from money they could just tap. They can't just call up their brother who's like the partner at a hedge fund, which happens all the time now that I've known in politics. So we in Bold PAC, we raise $10 to $15 million a year. We turn around and say, you know what? This is why we are here to exist. We dropped $1 million in the IE. We put pressure on every Democrat. We went to war against HMP and against all these other organizations that were ostensibly liberal and progressive and said, you're not going to be able to just bowl us over. And by the way, she won by 14 points. And I made sure they knew that we were there to do it. So you can't just pick and choose when you want Latinos. And we're not here just to be part of your token coalition. We are the coalition. We're not part of your leadership. We are the leadership. And if you don't want that, then you're going to have a tough time grabbing our votes in the future.
Now, you've written a very powerful book about your experience as a Marine combat, now veteran. Years ago, members of Congress was more than half were veterans of the military. Now it's, I believe, 1 in 6. What do we lose when we don't have veterans in Congress like yourself?
Well, the most important thing that you have with veterans is that you need to also keep the military in check. And a lot of times you have people that serve Congress, they're afraid to call out the military. They're afraid to tell somebody that has like a bunch of shiny stars and a bunch of ribbons that they're wrong. They're afraid to push the envelope and say, you know what, I think what you're doing and how you're training people is wrong, because they feel that somehow that they don't have equal value in their position. But the one thing I remind a lot of my colleagues, those that didn't serve in the military, is that this is a civilian-led military. We are a democracy. The military listens to us. We will tell them what to do, and you should not be ashamed to have an opinion on it, even if you don't feel it is, comes from a position of authority or experience. And if you look at it historically, it's actually been the civilian side of the military that has actually called a lot of things wrong. And I remind my colleagues every time, if you look at towards the beginning of World War II, a little before that, the United States military wanted to invest in battleships and only in battleships. It was congressmen who had no military experience said, you know what, we need to invest in our aircraft carriers. Had we listened to the military prior to World War II, we probably would have had, I think we eventually won World War II, but we would have had a horrible time. And so the most important thing I think that us that have served in the military can bring is that we're the people that can actually keep the Department of Defense in check. And sometimes that needs to happen. And I think a lot of us bring a little level of confidence to actually do that.
Now, you wrote a very vivid and powerful book about your combat experience, and you were been very open about the trauma that you're still grappling with as a result. I saw backstage when the Congressman was talking about Democrats have a Marxist agenda or Marxists. And you got very angry because you said back there, I guess I put my life on the line killing capitalists.
Yeah.
What do you mean by that? Are you offended when you hear that?
Yeah, I'm offended. Look, I'm an American. I'm a patriot. Like I've done and did things for this country that, you know, and I'm going to live with everything I've done for this country, and I'll do it again because, you know, I signed up to it, and I love this country, and I think there's a lot of us, a lot of Democrats that do this all the time. And then you have this other side that just wants to paint us as a bunch of socialists and Marxists and, you know, all these other things. Like, okay, that's really nice, Maria, but, you know, is it going to be really Marxist and socialist when the state of Florida asks for government support, when the, you know, Florida ends up needing billions of dollars in terms of recovery? She won't be complaining about socialism then, will she? You know, when they come over and you know, on the other side, when Republicans come over to join us when it comes to like the defense budget over here, they don't call us socialists. It's one of those things that, you know, they just throw this out there like it's a word, and they don't think it has any effect, right? I'm proud to be an American. I'm proud that I live in this country. I'm proud that we live in a capitalistic country. But that type of rhetoric, you know, it's just, it's employed in a manner that I think just ends up hurting the rest of this country. And, you know, she could decide to do it, but, you know, there's certainly a lot of hypocrisy when you start throwing names out like that.
Currently, polls show that about 65% of Latinos still vote Democratic, 35% vote Republican, could be changing, shifting. You have been very vocal saying Democrats have to do more, or we're going to see more Latinos voting Republicans. What are the Democrats failing to do?
What do they say the question again?
What are Democrats failing to do by losing some of these voters to Republicans?
So I think the most important things like Democrats need to do is they need to have a year-round campaign talking to Latinos. Don't talk to us in the last 6 weeks of an election. You know, also recognize that we are very diverse even within like our even subset of the communities. If you look at, like, for example, I'm Mexican Colombian, right? If you talk to half of my family, they have a very opinion. Talk to the other half of my family, the Colombianos, have a very different opinion. But even within those, you know, you talk to younger Latinos, younger Mexicanos, they're totally different than what older Latinos think. And so there's no nuance. They don't treat our community where it has a nuanced opinion, and they don't invest in that. You know, if you talk to like a political consultant that like invests or does campaigns with, you know, white voters, they'll recognize that there are, you know, white young women voters, white single women, young voters that are unemployed, young males that are unemployed, and they'll actually have like little specified niche campaigns towards them. But for Latinos, they just treat us as one big monolith, right? And we're not. I mean, for all the Latinos here, I mean, God knows, go sit around your dinner table, how many effing conversations do we have happening all at the same time, right? But the consulting class here in DC has made it very easy for themselves because if there is too much nuance in the Latino community, that means they have to go out and get new consultants that aren't them. So they just basically get to sell us as one thing because it's easier for them to sell their services.
You recently sent out a memo to your staff to say, let's stop using Latinx.
No, that's not true.
No.
No, I never sent out a memo. I made it very clear, never use Latinx, and it wasn't recent. It was since day one, yeah.
Yeah. Why is that? I mean, people say we should not say Encanto, we should say in context. Don't talk about brunettes.
What? Oh.
Why?
That's chistoso, okay? Yeah.
Why? I mean, I've seen academics use it. I've seen activists. Why do you think we should not use that term, or why do you think your staff should not use it?
Well, number one, the reason my staff should not use it is because we need to be reaching out to the majority of our community, right? And my congressional district is 65% Latino. I know my congressional district. I walk it every year. I've known them now for more than 12 years, before even that, working as a community activist. I know that my community does not use the term Latinx. I've never been to anything where anybody in my community used Latinx. So when my team is communicating out and using the term Latinx, what are they doing? They're not actually doing their jobs. They're not communicating. What they're doing is they're trying to piece somebody else. So if their job is to do constituent services, then talk to the constituents how they should be talked to. Don't talk to them how a bunch of white liberals at Harvard, Yale, Princeton, Swarthmore, whatever, think you should be talking to them. Our job is to connect. Our job is not to appease these other people. And so that's what I tell my staff. Now, when I go to events, and like there have been some community groups with very young, liberal Latinos, and they've asked me to refer to them as Latinx, absolutely I'll do that. I'm not an asshole all the time.
You can clap.
Most of the time. But that's a different situation because then you're being asked to do that. I'm not going to presume, unless I can prove it otherwise, that the rest of my committee likes being called that.
For our final 60 seconds left, are the Democrats going to maintain the majority in the House?
You know, I would say up until about 2 months ago, that was not going to happen. I think right now we are at a 50-50 shot. And I think number one reason is the Dobbs decision, the fact that they were through Roe v. Wade. I think the reason that's going to happen is because you're bringing two coalitions together that are important to winning, that we see when we win, Democrats win. I think it's going to motivate young Latinas to come out and vote in an off-year election that normally would not. If you take the general position of most people, Latinos are, anti-choice, we're very conservative, and that's just not true. Young Latinos and young Latinas especially are pro-choice, and they're going to come out and vote specifically for that. And anytime you bring a younger person out to vote, the yield for Democrats is probably 70 to 80%. Number two, there is a strong segment of the population of white Republican women that are also strongly pro-choice that I think are going to cross over. I think those two combinations are going to make some of these districts that are probably polling right now -2 Democrat or -1 Republican, whatever it is. I think it might actually put us over the top. So my prediction is either the Democrats hold the House by a small margin, like 7 to 8 seats, or the Republicans win it, but also by a small margin, 5 seats, which, man, if the Republicans only have control of the House by 5 seats, just wait to see that shit show. That is just not going to be good.
We'll have to leave that show right here. Thank you so much, Congressman Ruben Gallego. Thank you so much. Good job.
I'm going to take this water.
Introducing Axios Latino editor Astrid Galvan.
I'm so excited to introduce our next guest, a woman who has dedicated her life and career to advocacy and public service. She also comes from a long line of Visionarios as the granddaughter of labor leader Cesar Chavez. Please welcome to the stage White House advisor and Director of Intergovernmental Affairs, Julie Chavez Rodriguez. So I have to start with kind of a funny story. Julie, the last time that we spoke was in November 2020, right after President Biden got elected. Also, I was 9 months pregnant, and we were in this middle of this interview that I was very excited to have secured, and I started getting these crazy contractions. And in the middle of our interview, I just started making really embarrassing noises, and you were so gracious about it, so I just want to thank you.
Of course.
But 2 years later, at that time, the story was to court Latinos, Democrats have to expand strategy in 2022. And here we are, close to the midterms. What have Democrats done, and particularly what has the White House and President Biden done to make sure that Latinos are going to show up and vote for Democrats this year?
Well, one, it's amazing that you were continuing to do interviews well into, the time frame when you can have a baby, and so just congratulations. And I think it maybe came natural because fortunately I had coached my best friend in college through labor. She was in the Bay Area. I was in Los Angeles, and so it all worked out. So, I have a little bit of experience with it.
Next time
some
I'll call
coaching.
You.
Yeah, exactly. That might be my next line of work. But in all seriousness, we have been, I think, really focused on, at first, immediately, addressing the needs of the community. With the American Rescue Plan, we were able to get, checks in pockets. We were able to get our community vaccinated, get schools open, get people back to work. And then, look at opportunities like the child tax credit. I continue to really, focus on this because to me, it's going to have such a generational impact. With making the child tax credit available in monthly payments, we were able to cut childhood poverty among Latinos by 40%. So I think we have such a strong, record of accomplishment to really, be able to share with the community, to really show that as Democrats, we have delivered time and time again, and we're going to continue to do that because for us, that's why we've been brought in office. That's what we're entrusted to do. And we have a strong, we've had strong investments and a strong ground game since early on, and it's something we're going to continue to invest in and build on, not just in sort of the last couple of weeks or months of any particular cycle, but really throughout the entire time.
Yeah, and with the child tax credits in particular, I mean, we don't really know if those are going to come back or not. We do know that they made such a huge impact in childhood poverty. But when you think about that and the fact that inflation is sky high, and there's a lot of kind of turmoil in the economy right now, which is, as every time we poll, we know that that's a top issue among Latinos. How does that play into the decisions that you make and how you strategize? Because there are a lot of Latinos who are very concerned about the economy, and that definitely impacts their view of the president.
Yeah, no, great question. And I think, at the end of the day, it really is about investing in the American worker, investing in our families. At every turn, we've really been able to show that. And we've continued to see, I think, strong trends in terms of real wages rising at a rate that we haven't seen in our country. And it's based on, the president's real economic philosophy. And he continuously says that, we're going to rebuild the country and our economy from the bottom up and the middle out. And that's exactly what we've done. We've seen a more equitable recovery in the last 19 months than our country has ever seen before. And we're just getting started. I mean, the benefits of the American Rescue Plan are starting to be felt. We haven't even really begun to see the kind of job creation that will come from the bipartisan infrastructure law. The new CHIPS and Science Act is actually bringing American manufacturing back. And these are good jobs, they're union jobs, they're middle-class jobs. And we're going to make sure that Latinos and our community has a real on-ramp to that. And again, we're just, as we look at where we're making critical investments, it's both in the kind of immediate needs that our families have, as well as, the future of our economy.
How do you communicate those programs and everything that you've just talked about to Latinos, who might not be as in tune with what's going on or what's happened in Congress? Like, how do you get that message across, and what are some of the obstacles that you face when you're trying to, with that messaging?
Yeah, I mean, I think starting with some of the obstacles, we've seen the very strategic and targeted mis and disinformation campaigns, really focused on our community. And so I think that's a huge challenge that we have. And it's a challenge not just for the Biden administration or for government. I think it is really a challenge of our day right now. How do we continue to make sure that we are getting facts and accurate, information and truth out to communities that need this information most? And so what we've done, and I'll use the vaccination campaign as an example, where we were able to get parity for vaccines for the Latino community with other communities, but it was through partnerships. We worked closely with community-based organizations around the country, with trusted messengers, with people who had real relationships in and with our communities, so that it wasn't sort of this. It wasn't some kind of, for lack of a better description, right, voice of God coming to them, or something that they didn't necessarily sort of, someone they didn't have a personal relationship with, but really someone who was trusted, someone who could help to give them accurate information, who also connected them to support and to resources if they needed it. And that's what we're going to continue to do. In addition to, again, really showing Latinos at every turn that we will deliver for them and their families.
Yeah. So let's switch gears a little bit about, I know that a lot of people here are probably wondering what it was like to grow up in your family as the granddaughter of Cesar Chavez and from a long line of activists and advocates. Can you just tell us a little bit about what your childhood, like, was it did you have a normal childhood?
I thought it was so normal until I went off to college, and I remember, my freshman year at Berkeley, I had 2 roommates. Both of them were from Orange County, and it was random assignment, so they didn't have the same experiences as I did. And I realized, it wasn't, not everybody grew up on a picket line or knowing the, 5 pesticides that caused cancer. And were most widely used in table grapes in the 1980s. Those things weren't sort of everyday experiences that most kids grew up with, and so I feel extremely fortunate. I had a extremely rich, childhood in terms of experience. I was surrounded by people who were so committed and so driven by something that they considered la causa, the cause, something that was a cause bigger than themselves and bigger than any one person, and it became infectious, and that's what drives me till this day is being able to make sure I'm using my time and my energy and my talent to help to improve the lives of others, because I think we have one life and a short amount of time here, and I hope that it's purposeful.
Yeah, definitely. So the focus lately on immigration has been on what's happening at the border and some of the Republican governors who are sending migrants and asylum seekers to other places. But we know a lot of the constituents who helped get the president elected are people who have been fighting for a long time for a pathway to citizenship, to immigration reform. Is that dead? That doesn't seem to be part of the conversation right now. What's going on with that?
Well, look, we are continuing to push for a pathway to citizenship. I think there has been, and contrary to, I think, what previous speakers maybe have mentioned, on day one, the president put forward a comprehensive immigration reform bill. It was something that he said he would do, and he did it immediately, and knew that it was a critical, step that we needed to take as a country because we have not modernized our immigration system in, 30 actually, close to 30 years. We think about how much our country has changed, our economy has changed. It's, it is well past time to modernize our system. There has not been agreement, and we have tried really hard, I think, to make sure that we could bring Republicans to the table, and there just has not been a willingness to do so. So there were important efforts, bipartisan efforts, that the House was able to get done, passing the Dream and Promise Act and passing the Farm Workforce Modernization Act, and we, full-fledged supported those, and will continue to, and would encourage, folks to move those pieces of legislation, because even if we can start with some of those initial populations, let's start to modernize our system and show that there's a real path forward.
And what happens come 2022 if Democrats do lose the House and don't gain the Senate? Does the strategy change? Do we let go of that strategy? What happens then?
Well, we're pretty focused on the next few days ahead, and so we're going to continue to build momentum as we can.
Okay. We've seen in some parts of the country, like South Texas, where Latinos have slightly started to shift to the right and identify with GOP. I know, being from Texas, that this has been the case for a lot of Latinos for a long time. But I'm wondering whether this is on the president's mind, on your mind, in terms of how are you going to keep some of these voters within the Democratic Party, or how do you keep it engaged? Do you convince them to not ditch you for the GOP?
Well, I think it's continuing to really, connect with our community and continue to show, really where, again, where we've been able to deliver some real results. I think it's continuing to connect them to the new opportunities that are emerging, with the Inflation Reduction Act that we just passed. There's so many opportunities for Latino families to be able to, weatherize their homes to help, ensure that they're also going to take part and benefit from, kind of a more resilient, infrastructure. There's more opportunities that they have to be able to, also to, get lower prescription drug costs. And so it's really showing them what are the material and tangible things that we continue to deliver. And a lot of it is in the areas of being able to lower costs and raise wages for our Latino workers and our families.
Awesome. Well, that is about all of the time we have. I want to thank you so much for joining us today, and thank you to our audience and everybody watching live.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Julie. I keep doing that, sorry.
Please stay seated for a message from our sponsor, Unidos US.
I'm Hispanic, but my Spanish is not the best.
I am Latina, even if my last name doesn't sound like it. I am Latino, even if some don't think I look it.
Today, there is no one way of defining our identity.
But there is one way of defining how to become stronger.
Being unidos.
Because unidos, we can create more and better opportunities for all of us.
Unidos US, the largest Latino civil rights organization in the United States. Join us.
And now please welcome Noticias Telemundo Washington, D.C. Bureau Chief Lori Montenegro.
Buenas noches. Good evening, everyone. How many of you are hungry? How many of you are smelling that good food? A little bit longer. Just bear with me. We have a great final interview for you, and some great food and drinks are waiting on you all, but it'll go quickly, and then you can all go and eat and enjoy. Oh my gosh, I'm seeing all kinds of faces and friendly faces that I haven't seen in years. I love this. I love this. So our final speaker for the evening is the newly minted permanent, I said permanent, co-host for the show The View. Please help me welcome to the stage. She's also a political commentator and longtime strategist, Ana Navarro Cárdenas.
My friend of many years. And you guys, this is like the quietest Latino event I've ever been at. So I'm the only thing standing between you and free margaritas. So listen, you can laugh, you can clap, you can boo.
Listen,
dime.
Me encanta verte. Dime. Ay, bueno, si nos vamos a poner así, dale.
¿Y vamos a hablar en español o en inglés?
Vamos a hablar en inglés.
Hablemos en español
English,
para
please.
confundir a los americanos.
No. La gente de Axios me matan. Ana.
You know, whenever you're like in a elevator or something and you start speaking Spanish, people always think that you're talking bad about them. And frankly, we are.
And sometimes we're surprised because we think that they don't speak Spanish, and then they get out of the elevator and say, buen día. Ana, I want to get started with congratulations on that new position. I think that is awesome. Could you share with us what that felt like when you finally realized this is going to happen and I'm going to be named a permanent co-host? Did you yell? Did you scream? Tell us what happened.
I kind of saved the yelling and screaming to when I'm really pissed off, which happened a lot for 4 years, but I'm doing a little better now. Look, it actually was kind of a courting game for a while because, as you know, I live in Miami, and I got a pretty good life in Miami. I like living in Miami, right? There's like you can buy empanadas all over the place. There's great café con leche. There's people like to drive. I just have a great life with a great husband, a great dog, a great house, a great car. I like my life in Miami. And so moving to New York, where people are crazy, is not something, and they kind of like just run all day, is not something that I would do easily. But something that really weighed heavily on me was the idea, the sense of opportunity and responsibility that comes with being a Latino with a national platform. Frankly, we spend a lot of time, I know I spent a lot of time, complaining about there not being enough Latino voices and Latino faces and Latino stories on TV, in the movies, on unscripted TV and scripted TV. And so when you get a chance to be on there and to share our stories, then you've got to put up or shut up. And I think it's important that when we're talking about ferrying Venezuelans to Martha's Vineyard, frankly, I'd like to be ferried to Martha's Vineyard from Miami because it's very difficult to get there. But when there's somebody who's been a political exile, who's fled communism, who knows what it's like to make that trek. I didn't do it through the border, I did it on a plane, but I know what it's like to leave everything. And those things are things that, as a Latino on TV, I'm able to talk about. I'm able to do things like suggest that we recognize Julie Rodriguez Chavez on The View for Hispanic Heritage Month, because she is the highest level Latina to ever work in the White House. By the way, she's too proper to say this, but I don't know if you all know this. Julie sits in Ivanka's old office. So the first time I went to see her, I took sage.
Oh, boy. So, Ana,
para el mal de ojo.
Para el mal de ojo. You know, you brought up the whole DeSantis issue and the migrants being ferried to Martha's Vineyard.
Actually, they weren't ferried.
Well,
they went on a private charter costing $12,000 per person of taxpayer money, which means my money that was apportioned for something else. But we're not going to talk bad about DeSantis today because he's doing, I think, a good job with the hurricane, and to me that takes priority. I'm feeling very zen.
But he says that they have to do that to also call attention to the migration problem. Is that the correct way to do it?
I really didn't want to talk bad about DeSantis, but if you insist. Look, we all know what a political stunt looks like, smells like, and sounds like. And this was a political stunt. Frankly, I think he was trying to outdo Greg Abbott with his political stunt of sending migrants here. It doesn't solve anything. I would like, instead of this kind of energy, I would like there to be this level of energy in offering solutions. Because the bottom line is that as long as there is a ruthless dictator in Nicaragua, in Venezuela, in Cuba, people are going to flee, regardless of what they're coming to. And so unless we are part of the international community, we're part of that solution and addressing that problem, which is not easy to address. Yes. Because the times of when we would change regimes, those times are over. We do things differently now. But this is, so this is a stunt. I think there's other things that can be done. And frankly, he probably got those Venezuelans closer to Miami, which is where they want to be anyways.
What or how would you describe the state of the Republican Party at this moment? Tú me dijiste que te preguntara cualquier cosa. She told me that I could ask her anything. I'm asking.
I told you everything except my weight, for which I also blame Donald Trump. But no, listen, the Republican Party at the moment, I almost feel like you need to have a degree in psychiatry to talk about it, because it's a combination of dysfunction and multiple personality disorder and hallucinations and just plain route lying. I think that there's certainly a group of Republicans, and it's a small group, that are not Trump Republicans, that are not Trumpublicans, that are old-fashioned Republicans. I would tell you I belong to that group. My husband does. People like Liz Cheney, people like Mitt Romney, and many others, some of whom, or frankly most of whom, are either retiring, lost primaries, or died, like John McCain did. And so it becomes harder and harder to make the argument that this is not Trump's party, and it'll certainly become an impossible argument to make if he becomes the nominee again. And I do think that if he runs again, he will be the Republican nominee again.
Do you envision a showdown between him and DeSantis in 2024?
I think Ron DeSantis is going to run regardless of whether Donald Trump runs or not. And it's got to be driving Donald Trump crazy that this guy hasn't gone to kiss his ring or any other body part and is being seen as the heir apparent without his anointment, right? Without his appointment, without his blessing. So I think that if Trump runs, DeSantis will run regardless, and we will have a showdown, and I'm all here for it. Just give me the popcorn.
Midterms, what do you see happening? We just heard Representative Gallego said he believes 50-50 that Democrats could retain the House.
Look, I'm not going to put a number on it, but I do think that there's been a huge shift since the Dobbs decision. And I think part of it is, you know, for so long, for decades, people were using that issue as a political wedge issue. And it was almost theoretical. And I think we had come to believe this is really never going to change. It's now been 50 years. This is just, you know, people being Chicken Little and claiming the sky is falling, but it's never going to change. Who would take a right away after 50 years of living with that right? But the dog caught the car, and now they have to live with the consequences. And the consequences, I think, are far worse than anybody imagined, because the consequences are a 10-year-old girl in Ohio not being able to get an abortion. The consequences are the mother in Texas having to carry a child without a skull to term. The consequences are women having miscarriages and not being able to get critically needed DNCs and other procedures for their own welfare and their own safety and lives. The consequences are dangers and threats to IVF. So those are the consequences that we are reading about and hearing about on a daily basis. And hell knows no fury like a woman's wrath. And there are a lot of people who are very, very angry, women and their allies, at the idea that there's a bunch of men, a lot of them who wouldn't be able to draw a women's reproductive system if their life depended on it. Yes, Lindsey Graham, talking about, you know, banning abortion federally and taking away rights from women.
What does November 9th look like? The day after, my birthday.
I don't know what it looks like, because lately we don't know anything by the day after. It's taken, you know, I'm from Florida. You know, it takes us a while. Yeah. And it takes, so I think the day after, Chuck Schumer is still going to be the majority leader of the Senate. I think we don't know what's going to happen in the House, but whatever happens, it's going to be a lot closer margin than people expected. And that's going to be hell for McCarthy, because it means that he does not have the luxury, and it's going to be hell for the country, by the way, if he becomes Speaker, because it means that at that point, his well, I would say spine, but I don't know where that's gone either, but he is owned by people like Marjorie Taylor Greene and Lauren Boebert and Matt Gaetz. He will be owned by them because he can't afford to lose those votes, because it'll be a very, very small margin. But I'll also tell you this, November 9th, Joe Biden will still be president. And so regardless of who is the majority in the House or the majority in the Senate, we know that he's going to be president and he's going to have a veto pen in his hand. And so we're either going to be in a position where very little is going to get done and a lot of vetoes are going to pass, or not. And I don't know what that's going to look like.
We've got 45 seconds.
¿Y qué tú quieres hacer con 45 segundos? Somebody bring me a margarita. That's all I can do for 45 seconds.
That you talk to Latino voters, and it doesn't matter what their party affiliation is, about the importance of going to vote.
You know, one of my biggest frustrations is we always talk about the Latino vote as the great giant that's going to wake up. And I don't know when we're going to wake up and when we're really going to be respected in the way we need to be respected. And so I so much want Latinos not to be taken for granted by one party and openly antagonized and used as targets by another party. And I think that only happens if we show up, and it's not just about voting, it's about voting, but it's about organizing, it's about donating, it's about showing up to events like this. And by the way, Hispanic Heritage Month is going to kill me because it's like one event after the other. I really wish it was Hispanic Heritage Year, because we shouldn't only be doing this in 1 month and then people forget for another 11 months. We should be demanding time and after time that our leaders, that our personalities, that our issues be front and center every single month, every single day.
Muchísimas gracias. Thank you, Ana.
Muchísimas
it was a pleasure
thank you
talking to you today.
To Telemundo, to my friend Lori.
Thank you. So Before we wrap, we want to say thank you to you, all here in the audience. We want to say thank you to those watching online, those waving back. Thank you so much. Thank you for joining us for a special evening where we honor Visionarios. And there's many in this community. I think each one of you sitting out in the audience and watching are Visionarios in our community. We have wonderful food waiting for you, wonderful desserts. Please stay, enjoy, continue to make friends and contacts. Thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of your evening.